Hello, my name's Russell Brown, and welcome to Photoshop Archives. Michael, Shainblum.
Hello.
So incredible to have you here.
Thank you.
I've put together a series of podcasts all about the amazing world of Photoshop. I'd like to talk about some of my stories, but I'm really here to chat with you, Michael, about Photoshop and what you're doing with it, where's it going, what's happening, get a pulse on the world of Photoshop with you.
Right.
So tell our audience right now, who the heck are you and why should we care?
Yeah, so my name is Michael Shainblum. I'm a full-time photographer and filmmaker, mainly specializing in landscape, cityscape, aerial, time-lapse. I kind of do a mix of stuff, though, to stay creative and not get too bored.
I love your work, and I've followed your work for a long, long time.
Thank you so much.
I just have to dive right in and ask you some questions about the things I'm seeing online with you. It's all about landscapes. And I'm just astonished by where you're going, when you're going there, and how the heck you stayed there. Let's talk about a shot of in San Francisco of the Golden Gate Bridge, multiple strikes of lightning on the Golden Gate Bridge around that area.
I know the shot.
You know the shot. And we as humans look at this and think, well, that's pretty easy. But I know you sat in pouring rain and you composited these, did you not? How do you bring all of those strikes of lightning? How do you bring those all together? And did you bring them together in Photoshop?
Yeah, crazy enough, a program called Photoshop. You might have heard of it. Yeah. That was an interesting photograph because that was not the first night that I sat there in the pouring rain for multiple hours. I was actually trying to get a photograph like that for probably about 4 or 5 years previous to finally getting that one. And every single time I would get little lightning strikes, but they would be basically covered in rain, so you wouldn't really be able to see the strike. You would just get the flash of the strike. So it would just be like this white screen. And, for 3 or 4 times I went home, drenched without a photograph and so frustrating.
You covered it all? The camera's getting wet?
Yeah, I always cover the cameras. I don't do as well of a job covering myself as I do the cameras.
Those familiar with the Bay Area, he's sitting in the Marin Headlands?
What I wanted to do with that photograph is set the camera for about 3 to 4 hours doing a time lapse and just keep
in the rain, getting wet. Okay, keep on going.
And then keep the lens clean using like a little rocket blower to get the water spots off there. And during that night, I had a few strikes that I really liked. So I took some single exposures, but I really wanted to capture the whole experience, like what the whole night felt like. So to do that, I think it was my 30 or 40 best strikes from those 3 to 4 hours. And then I composited them using Photoshop, using different blend modes, and then, shifting and you have to do little bits of masking to get rid of certain elements that weren't there. And then that was the final result. Yeah.
Blend modes. It has to be our favorite, has to be screen blend mode.
Oh, screen's pretty good.
Yeah.
Screen's a good one.
And
like
I agree. As I'm bringing those composites together, you can then shift the lightning strike slightly. Or is the bridge light coming into play? Do you separate the lightning strike from the bridge?
Yeah, I had to do a bit of that because let's say I was to bring in one of the lightning strikes using screen or using soft light, there would always be some sort of inconsistency within the city lights or down in the water. So that's where masking came into play and going in and removing those elements so that it's just the bolt or the bolt. But I also had to account for the reflections that were going in the water as well.
It's a masterpiece and envious of it. Okay, here's the big question. It's going to come up all the time. I'll go back in my old timer voice again. Let's go back in time when you just had the clone tool.
Yeah.
Here's the question I was after. I've had friends in photography. They'll look at a piece like that and say, well, you're cheating. Compositing is cheating. Blending things is cheating. I guess I didn't look at it that way. Isn't that interesting how, using standard Photoshop tools, in the in around 2000, they said we were cheating. Today, they say we're cheating because we might use a generative fill. I think it's just it's the timing of the technology. What are your thoughts on that, on cloning, masking, generative fill, the old tools versus the new tools?
I don't use a ton of generative fill just in what I do, but I do use some of the masking or some of the cloning tools. Like the clone stamp is great. Also, the newer remove tool, which does use AI. Although I guess it could be debated that the clone stamp tool kind of was the first AI tool, right? In a way.
It had some intelligence.
Yeah,
to it.
exactly. So maybe it wasn't labeled as AI, but kind of was the start of AI tools in Photoshop.
I was always looking for tools that would help me get my job done faster and more efficient.
I guess not the clone stamp, the spot healing brush. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And as each one of these tools came out, weren't you amazed? Like, oh, wow, that's the next best thing. That's the next best thing. Did you ever have that feeling?
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing some of the tools that are available now. I've never really seen it as cheating unless, I mean,
It's maybe
art is art, right? Anyone can do whatever they would like to their photographs as long as they're honest with what they're doing. Just don't lie to people about what you're doing.
Let me hit the ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding. Let me hit the bell on that one, because therein lies the secret. Being honest about what you're doing. And I've taken that on. I was called out, is that person really there? Was that cloud really there? It's fine if it's there. It is art, as long as you tell the audience it is art, and then they stop. But they know me now. They know that I'm crazy. Do you think every photograph that you take has to be exactly the same pixels that were captured with that camera? In other words, are you willing to go in and adjust your images and alter them beyond what they were?
I think there's a broad spectrum of ways you can go about it, and it comes down to what an artist wants their artistic statement to be. Like, what are they trying to show people? I have friends who are great landscape photographers, but they do dabble more into compositing skies from different places, and that's the art that they want to create. I wouldn't say I'm a purist, because I do like to process my images. I like to create a mood. I like to dodge and burn. I like to, blend images together, but I'm somewhere in the middle of it all, I think. Like, I'm not really compositing the Milky Way and throwing it over places where it wasn't or that I didn't see it. But I really like to process my work to give it a certain mood. And that's one of my favorite parts of the creative process. So if I took that away, I'd be taking away something that really brings me happiness. And I'm not really willing to do that.
I always see your work as a sort of a purist. I look to your work because I respect it, in that I know you sat there and you got that shot in that location. Whereas I think people see me as, yeah, I'm going to do anything to cheat, to not sit there in the rain. There's that honesty again that we both love and respect a good image that we know was created. And I think we both can do that. We look at an image online and we know that that photographer worked really hard to get that shot and that place and that location. Really interesting. I want to switch gears to your video. Yeah, we know you're compositing and you're bringing images together, blend modes and such. You also take time lapse and process that through Lightroom and Photoshop. Tell us about the workflow. Where does it start, and how do you take it, and how much Photoshop is involved in bringing together a time lapse like that?
Time lapses are interesting. It requires sitting for even longer periods of time, waiting for a bunch of images to, complete. Although some time lapses can be a lot shorter than people think. Like, they see a cityscape time lapse, like some of the ones that I did in New York. They're like, oh my gosh, you were sitting there for hours. And really, I was just sitting there for like 5 to 10 minutes. That's all it took to get, the right flow of motion. But with the night sky stuff, you have to do those long exposures to let more light into the camera to really brighten up the scene, to capture the stars. So you do have to sit there for 3 to 4 hours at least.
What's the exposure time for a single shot?
I think for those ones, it might have been 15 seconds each. And then I'm using a very low aperture lens to let in even more light. And
We have to bring this up. The audience wants to know, what camera do you use?
what was that one captured on?
You use multiple cameras?
Yeah, I had two that because I was doing the time lapse and then I was doing the stills for the final image. I had the time lapse rolling on, I think, the Sony A7S
Okay.
3, and then the still was taken on the A1, and I used a star tracker. So I'm aligning with the North Star so that I could get longer exposures of the Milky Way and get more detail in the core.
A lot of equipment to pull this off because you've got the Milky Ways in motion, the airplanes are in motion, the comet is in motion. Is there any movement happening that you're capturing in the water down below?
Yeah, a bit of
Clouds
movement.
are in motion.
Yeah.
So now you've taken all these photographs with your camera. What's the next step?
With the time lapse, I'll usually process them using Lightroom, go through and kind of edit a photograph, one of the photographs through the sequence, similar to what you would do just a regular image. But then you have to go through and sync it to every single shot, all 400, and see if it looks good through each image or not. And sometimes it doesn't. So there's another external program that I use called LR Timelapse, which helps to gradate and interpolate every single frame in between. So you basically set keyframes. You'll process, let's say, like 3 to 5 images out of that sequence, and then it'll animate everything in between, which is pretty handy.
Is that a Lightroom plugin?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what Lightroom is really good at, is taking all of those hundreds of exposures.
Yeah, I
Hundreds.
think that one.
You take all those hundreds, give them a look, and now you've exported them. Where's our next step?
So I do use After Effects for most of the time lapses. I'll export them out and then bring them into After Effects and then do my final, bringing those into a video clip. But you can also bring it into a video clip in Photoshop if you don't have After Effects.
I am a video Photoshop maniac. I don't think there's anybody on the planet who uses Photoshop as much as I do for video. And each time I hear them, there's rumors, we may take, why is video in there? I just some amazing things that people don't quite realize you can do with video inside of Photoshop. Using the dehaze filter on video, help me. That makes, for night photography, and I just love that type of capability. I guess it's a little odd, but if I grew up in Photoshop, that's the way I drive down the street. I'm not going to switch over to Premiere or anything. I just love the masking, compositing, and blend modes that I have in Photoshop. I often wonder why more people don't do it, but I can understand with After Effects has quite a few more features and tracking and removing things over time. The finished results of your time lapse just are on cutting edge above anybody else. The meaning of success is the day that someone can see one of your photographs I'm coming out of Photoshop and it has your look to it. I get this comment, I know that was your photograph in the first 2 seconds as I saw it on Instagram. There was just no question about it. I think you have that look. That is my true, you're successful when people can recognize your look. Do you have a quote similar to that?
Being successful as an artist, right?
Oh,
more broad.
Okay. It is true. It is. You are an artist.
I think success is what you make of it, right? But people have different intentions with what they're doing with art. Some people want to sell their art. Some people want to get big and famous with their art. Some people just want to create art because it makes them happy and they want to be the best version, the best artist they can possibly be. And since I started as a kid, I've always just wanted to create art and keep progressing and keep getting better and keep challenging myself. And, regardless of the social media and all this other stuff, I think I've done that over the years and just kept working at it. And, you have your ups and downs with it too. Like you get creatively burnt out or you're feeling down on your work one day. But as long as you can take that more as a learning experience and keep challenging yourself and keep working at it and don't let that get you too down, then I think you're a successful artist. But again, there's so many definitions of success. I don't want to put anyone in a box.
What are you working on, and what's bringing in as a professional? What are the projects that make the most money in the industry of being a professional photographer? Do your clients come to you now?
They used to more than they do now. I've had to do a bit more outreach for commercial projects. I mean, commercial projects can be great. It's just tough. Landscape photography isn't the first thing that people think of when they're like, I want to reach out to a photographer to work with me. Usually landscape isn't the first choice on that list in terms of practical photography needs, right? You've got like your wedding, your product photography, your portrait. Landscape is somewhere down here in terms of what people actually need for commercial use. But yeah, a little mix of commercial photography. I dabble in a bunch of different stuff. And honestly, that's kind of a nice thing because it keeps me inspired because I get to do a bunch of different stuff instead of just one thing. I've never been good at just doing one thing. One thing that was like a fun challenge for me is like starting up a YouTube channel and doing vlogs and tutorials over there. And that has certainly helped to bring in some new clients and new advertising opportunities and things like that. Education is big for landscape photography. People will teach workshops around the world. I do some of that stuff as well. And I'd say the lowest thing right now is print sales. I don't do a lot of print sales, although you can be very successful in doing that too if you put a lot of work into it. I just don't put a lot of work into that side.
How much time focused on, say, for example, Photoshop tutorials or Lightroom tutorials?
I usually put out a few a year. Like I'll do some paid tutorials that people can purchase, or some free as well. Like every once in a while, I'll put out like a Lightroom YouTube tutorial or like a Photoshop. Maybe I'll find some trick that I really like in Photoshop and I'll focus on that for a specific video for YouTube.
Is there one favorite Photoshop tool? I'll tell you what mine is when you tell me what yours is. Any tool that we wouldn't live without.
Can I give you two?
The judges will allow it too.
So it's not a tool exactly, but it's something that I've made into a tool. It's dodging and burning in Photoshop, but it's basically I'll take my photo and I'll make a new layer, and then I set that to either soft light or overlay, and then I just brush on the photograph. And I've done that for I don't know how many years. I do it to most of my photographs, and the reason I like it so much is because I can take my drawing tablet and I get to brush on the image. And you get that tangible feeling of, working on an image or like painting on the photograph, which I used to do before photography, paint and sketch. So I've wanted to bring that into the creative process, and that's probably my favorite personally.
Your number one can bring tears to my eyes because I totally agree that I think I'm not sure people use Photoshop enough to putting two layers on top of each other and then blending through, painting through, dodging and burning. The old school tools are so powerful. Mm-hmm. You said one. I'm going to say mine. Then you get to say your second one.
Yeah.
This is a good game. I'm going to keep this up. My favorite. This is so bizarre. My favorite on an everyday basis is just levels. Levels. I think it's maybe not appreciated. Maybe I don't know. But on a daily basis, I'm doing color correction. I'm doing color balancing. I learned the old school method from John Knoll, the John Knoll, one of the creators of Photoshop, he and his brother. And he shows me levels for the first time and the power of that. Mm-hmm. And I even challenged Thomas Knoll once. I said, Thomas, there's something in levels that does not exist in curves. Listen, I'm telling Thomas Knoll, who wrote Photoshop, that there's a difference mathematically between levels and curves.
What did he say?
He said, yes. Thomas Knoll does like, well, you're right. There is something different in the technology between levels and curves. And I was just like, okay, Thomas Knoll told me I was right, that you can adjust things in a different way with different results, and only with levels that cannot be done with curves. There, I've said it. I hope he said it to me, so I can say it here. Yeah. Gosh, the things, levels to adjust a mask, levels to adjust the color, levels to change the edge of a selection. That is something I wonder if I could have just Photoshop with levels and could I pull off miracles with just those two items. It's back to you.
Okay, so I think my favorite tool, like specific tool, this is also specific mainly to landscape or scenics, the introduction of the sky selection was put into Photoshop. I think that was one of the most helpful tools to be able to separate the sky from the land, versus what you had to do previously. All the different weird techniques you had to do to select the sky before. Now, I mean, just one button, you have the sky, one button, you have the foreground. But I'm not using it in the way a lot of people think, like, oh, sky selection, you must be replacing the sky with something else. It's not about that. It's about being able to select it so that you can just darken the sky instead of the foreground, or bring out elements of the foreground using just that one selection and one mask, or even bringing in multiple exposures, like different, points of light. So if you have a really bright sun in the sky, and then you do multiple exposures so that you can then, get the foreground and the sky balanced together. The introduction of that tool, I think, was huge just in terms of scenic and landscape photography.
I agree. Just the simplest thing of select sky or select subject. Amazing amount of time. Amazing technology. People ask me, why have you stayed at Adobe for so long, Russ? What inspires you? What inspires me are what the programmers can come up with in Photoshop. I'm not asking for these things. It's such brilliant things. Like, where did that magic come from? You look at something like sky replacement, and you start being the type of person who digs down into the layers of things. You look at what they're selecting, that's a really intelligent selection.
Yeah.
Down into the details, or the separation of the leaves, or how it transitions from the sky into the foreground.
Can I give a tip?
Ooh, ding, 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 ding. A tip and technique from Michael Shainblum. Go ahead.
If you're going to use the sky selection, the one thing I would recommend is doing a slight gradient right at the edge of where the horizon is, just to soften that area. That's the only thing that would be good to do.
Let me define this. I want to ask to clarify this. So I'm going to make the selection with the sky.
Select sky. Yeah.
Then I'm going to turn it into a mask and put a gradient in.
Yeah, so you could either just throw a gradient in, you'd have to use another mask on top of it, which...
then we would be compositing.
Yes. I believe so.
I'm in contract to use that word.
Oh, okay. And if you need to make a mask on top of a mask, all you have to do is, so you've got your mask, right? Let's say you made the sky selection on top of the layer, but you're like, but I want another mask. What do? You make a group, and you throw that into a group, and then the group gets its own mask. And then you can add another on top of it. You're basically just taking two or multiple layers and putting them all in its own folder, right? Its own section, so it can be moved or isolated together. But you can make a mask for that group. So you can mask all those layers at the same time.
Wait a minute, it's another ding, 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 ding. I didn't know this.
But it's a trick, because if you've got a mask on top of a layer, but you want to add another mask, you just have to add it into a group, and then it gets its own new mask.
Oh, that is a good one.
Every single photograph, I end up doing that.
I think there are secrets like that. I think there's a whole section on hidden secrets that you could do in 1990.
We should make a tutorial on this.
Yeah, that's a good tutorial. Don't worry. We will. Let's recap. You had dodge and burn. Then I was doing levels. And then what was your
sky selection?
Sky selection.
But also used as a foreground selection.
As a foreground. This is another Wayback Machine, and I won't change my voice. Okay, he will change his voice. It's back to blend modes. It's the blend if. It's an odd thing. I do a right click on the layer, and then you open it up, and you move your highlights and your shadow points of the blend if, and you can then, for example, drop off the blue qualities to an image, make the sky disappear, and only the foreground appears. It's the oddest little form of crazy masking, but it's one of those things I've held on to for years. I'm lazy, I'm tired, I want to get it done fast. I want quick ways to do something, and the blend if is the oddest thing. It goes back to the beginning of time, and moving the blue slider on blend if, and it makes the blue disappear without having to make a mask. A blend if combined with a blend mode is crazy stuff. It's crazy stuff to get two images to blend together. It's the old-fashioned way.
I'm going to have to try that.
This has been a fabulous conversation, and I think we could continue on for days. It's been fantastic to know a little bit about your work as a landscape photographer, working in Photoshop, Lightroom, Premiere, After Effects. It's really, really fantastic to sort of sit down and get a sense of, I'm always looking to look back in time, but look forward as to where Photoshop's going. And I'm just excited, as I said, to see where it's going next. Do you have any closing remarks? What do you think? What do you want to see in Photoshop of the future? What's missing?
Ooh, okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting. I really appreciate it. This was awesome. I think it would be great to see more intuitive tools for focus stacking.
Focus stacking.
Yeah.
Tell us what focus stacking is.
Focus stacking is taking, basically, if you're close to a foreground element and you want to get everything in focus, well, at a certain point, when you're so close to an object, regardless of what f-stop you use, it's impossible.
I've seen this in fine watch photography. The intricate details of a watch, and the camera's really super close. And how many photographs do you take?
It depends on the photograph. I try and minimize the amount of work by doing less photographs at a higher f-stop, right? So rather than doing like 10 images at f8, I might do f16 and only have to do 2 or 3 images.
So now you've got a series of images. I've got the back of the watch, the middle of the watch, the front of the watch are in focus. And now you can blend them together. You can do it in Photoshop. You first have to align the layers, which gets rid of any of the focus breathing. And focus breathing?
Yeah, some lenses have focus breathing. So anyways, I don't want to get too technical, but
That's technical.
align the layers, and then you can do a layer blend. You can blend them all together.
Okay.
But it would be great if this was just a button. Could be in Lightroom and Photoshop.
How often do people do this?
In landscape, you do it quite a bit. A lot of people do it in landscape. I believe macro photography is big for focus stacking because you have such a thin area that's in focus and you have to take a bunch of different shots to, let's say, going back to the watch example, let's say you're shooting like a bug, right? Like a spider with a macro lens. Your focus point is razor thin there, so people will have to take multiple exposures and blend those together. It would be awesome to see its own individual tool for that, rather than going through the steps of first align, then go here, then go there. Just focus stacking. It'll stack everything together.
We will close with that one. It's a great idea. I know who to talk to about those things. That would be fantastic. I think the future of Photoshop is one button tasks. The select sky, eliminate objects, the telephone lines, people in the shot. Those are the beauty of the future, I think. And this could be another one of those instant.
I think it's getting rid of the tedious things, the things that aren't so creative, to get photographers and artists back to the things that are creative, the things that we really enjoy doing. Because I don't think anyone really enjoys cloning out dust spots. But in terms of dodging and burning and playing with colors and contrast, that's the things that we as photographers and artists want to do. So,
Ding, 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 ding. Did we hear that, what Michael just said? I think that was a really great ending point. Fantastic.
yeah.
Once again, thank you so much for joining me here in this podcast. I'm looking forward to more of these podcasts, and I think we should have Michael back again. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Russell. I appreciate it.